Your Creative Push, episode 262.
Whatever is important to you, sit down and write it down. If you don't have the goals, you'll never achieve it.
Welcome to Your Creative Push, the podcast that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. I'm your host, Youngmin Brown, and my guest today is Carrie Waller. Carrie is a watercolor artist who works in a realistic, detailed style. She has a background in interior design, and her studies in graphic design, as well as her time spent living in Europe and Asia, have influenced her greatly as an artist, and she comes on the show to talk about just that. Now, Carrie's husband is in the Air Force, so that has required her and her family to move around the world quite a bit. So she talks about how she's been able to maintain a creative life with that in mind. Not just moving around to many locations, but being in those locations for a short period of time. And one of the things that really helped her during that time was this podcast that I found because of her called Artists Helping Artists. And she actually eventually became a co-host of that podcast. Really cool story. But Carrie also talks about not just dealing with the traveling around the world, but how that traveling has made a positive effect on her art. She also talks about the importance of having accountability partners or groups, and she talks about her own personal group, WHAM. And then we talk about some of the resistances that she has dealt with, how she deals with self-doubt, but also balances her time with being a wife, a mother, and an artist. Carrie also talks about being brave and reaching out to other creatives that you want to connect with, and also reaching well beyond your goals, setting very difficult goals for yourself, but then also thinking beyond those goals. Just an inspiring person, an inspiring artist, and somebody who has found a way to make sure that her art has remained a part of her life despite difficulties that would hold other people back for sure. So please do enjoy my conversation with Carrie Waller. Carrie, welcome to Your Creative Push.
Hi, good morning or good evening for you, I guess.
Good morning, good evening, either way. Yeah, I'm done work, so it's evening for me, but very happy to be talking to you now. So we usually like to start out by giving you an opportunity to give kind of a brief bio, sort of how you got to the point you are today in your life and your creative life.
Okay. I think like most of us that are artists, I've been creative or interested in art since I was a kid. And I think I found out, I didn't realize I was interested in it or good at it until I was in the third grade and my art teacher entered one of the pieces I did in school into the Texas State Rodeo and I won a blue ribbon.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So all of a sudden I was aware that I might be, talented in that area. So from there, I just was always that kid in school that was drawing, painting, and all the kids knew that I was decent at it. So that was kind of my identity through school. It was, art. I was the art club president, all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And so as I went into college, I decided to go into graphic design. Did that for about a year and decided that wasn't what I wanted to do. So I switched over to interior design. And that is actually what I got my degree in. I had that all figured out and I had a job that I was working at in college at an architectural firm. And then I met my husband senior year of college and we ended up getting married and his first job and our first adventure as a married couple, we moved overseas to Europe. So that kind of changed my whole trajectory and I had to decide how I was going to be creative. I couldn't really work in the interior design field with the language barrier and some other things like that. So I had to kind of switch gears and figure out how I was going to do something creative. And I decided as long as I was going to follow my husband's career around that I would pursue something creative the whole time. So while we were there, I really learned I had to create my own thing and invent my path, even though it was different than I thought it was going to be. So I went to the library and I checked out every single book on watercolor and kind of went through and taught myself techniques so that I could teach classes so that I can make money. That was my main focus, was just generating some income. So I started teaching classes to adults, to kids. I ended up doing the Boys and Girls Club art program in Europe. And I also painted murals for the Air Force. So I had kind of an interesting things that I did while we lived there. And so when we left there, I still wanted to stay in that kind of arena, that creative field. And the next place we went to was Charleston, South Carolina. And so I went into business with a lady, and we painted murals the whole time. So still staying with my art and kind of interior design a little bit with murals and faux finishing and things. And then whenever I started having children, my husband is in the Air Force. So he deployed when I had a toddler at home and a baby. And I thought for my sanity, I needed to do something, to deal with the stress of Brian being in a very dangerous place and having two small children at home. So I had just watched the movie Julie and Julia, and I don't know if you've seen that one.
Not yet.
Okay, so the lady Julie, she basically blogs her way through the Julia Child cookbook.
Oh, okay.
So I'd read the book and I saw the movie, and so she blogs her way through it, and it inspired me. And that was kind of when blogs were just, becoming a thing, or, when mainstream, I guess is a better way to put it. So I decided I should start a blog, and that's when I was like, what would I blog about? And honestly, painting wasn't the first thing that came to my mind. And then I thought, well, I used to dabble in, watercolor. So maybe I'll do a painting a week. So that's what I decided to do in the beginning, was a painting a week. And I would blog my way through that journey. And on that journey, I actually started following a podcast called Artists Helping Artists. It's kind of an art marketing podcast. And I literally did whatever the host said she was doing. I would listen. It was my marketing advice, my way to navigate through the art world. And so I started with that, and I would, write to Leslie, who's the host, Leslie Seda, and eventually started co-hosting with her at one point. I'm a guest co-host now, occasionally. I just kind of followed what she was doing and how she was doing it. It really helped motivate me and keep me going. And, it's so isolating being an artist, or it was for me anyway, and moving all the time. So it really helped me have my own outlet and a group and a way to start something myself. And so through this process, I took a watercolor workshop with Paul Jackson. And I literally went in the back of the Artist magazine and found the one closest to my in-laws who could care for my children. So I really didn't know much about Paul Jackson at all. And so I researched him, of course, after that, and found out he's an amazing artist. So I took a workshop with him, and through that met several people in the Louisiana Watercolor Society. I didn't even know there were art societies out there at this time. I was very naive in this whole process. And I also started researching professional artists that were in watercolor, and came across some different people and reached out to those artists. And everyone was very helpful and got back to you. And so after that workshop and meeting the people in Louisiana Watercolor Society, I thought, well, maybe I should actually think about, pursuing this professionally, or at least take it completely serious and not just a hobby. And so that's what I did. And I started entering shows with Louisiana Watercolor Society. And the first show I was in, I won first place. And that was kind of like the thing I needed, the catalyst to push me even further, to realize that, maybe I had some talent in this area. Like I said, in this whole process, I've been pretty naive. I didn't know there was I didn't realize that maybe there could be a strategy to the whole thing. I just entered contests and, met people and kind of created my own path, and it worked for me. And, that's kind of where I am today. We're currently living in Japan, in Tokyo, Japan.
Nice.
My husband is deployed again. And so I'm back on, you kind of have ebbs and flows in your career and in your life. And I'm back on with Brian gone again, and kind of pushing me again, that another little push to get serious again after having some, I wouldn't say setbacks, but there's different times when you can focus more, and other times when you have to focus on your family and things. So I'm back in that mode again, where I'm trying to get myself geared up. I went back to the States for the first time in 3 years this summer, and I taught my first workshop in the States in 3 years. And so it was great to get my feet back into the water again, and really push me.
Right. Well, yeah, through your journey, it sounds like there's a lot of, obviously physical relocation, but I think for every creative person, there's like the peaks and valleys, like where you're either like totally into it or you have something else going on in your life that you have to like attend to, which totally makes sense. Now, what is your strategy for when you either have to like relocate or get back in that mindset? I feel like a lot of what you're doing is like in the digital world, like trying to like, have a blog and stuff like that. Is that like purposeful? Like so that no matter where you go, you can always have that be a part of you as opposed to like starting classes and like, are you doing any like classes in Japan?
I have not taken any classes. I've taught a little bit since we've been here. I'm not taking any right now. I will tell you one of the biggest things that happened, aside from coming across that podcast and following along and feeling like I had that art community, during one of those podcasts, Leslie mentioned starting a mentoring group. I honestly kind of heard it and I thought, oh, that's a really good idea. But someone approached me and said, would you like to be part of this group? And I thought, well, yeah, I would like to do that. And so through that, we started with a group of people and we filtered through several others, but we are now down to like 5 of us that are in this core group, and we call ourselves Women Artist Mentors. So WAM for short. Nice. So it's probably that's been one of the biggest things that has happened in my life to keep me focused, to keep my head in the game. My husband has a very demanding career, and there's a lot of obligations and there's a lot of things that I have to do with his career that can obviously take my focus off art. And of course, I have 2 little boys right now. So right. That is, a priority for sure. So having these ladies in my life, and it's Deborah Kearse, Helen Beecham, Kim Minichello, and Maria Bennett Hawk. And having these ladies in my life has kept me, I don't know. I might have at some point put my brush down for a while, but I couldn't because I had these ladies that I'm accountable to. Right. And so this group of ladies has really just propelled me, kept me in it. We meet once a month we used to do Google Hangouts. Now we use Zoom. So we meet and we see each other and we talk once a month. We also travel together. So we went to Venice 2 years ago. A couple of them have come to Japan to see me. And then this summer, just last May, we went to Montreal all together.
Nice.
Yeah. It's this friendship and this professional group that has made all the difference, honestly, in my life. They keep me focused.
So important to have like-minded people around you, whether it's just like a friend that you can count on, like to be like, hey, like this is what I created, like what are you creating? Just to like know that there's somebody else that is focused on you and has skin in the game with you as well, like is encouraging to you, is like motivating to you, and will help to push you to, further your goals, even if it is only in your mind where it's like, oh, I have to do this in order to live up to their standards, So like having a mastermind group like that is so important.
Yeah, not only that, but we can talk art. I move every 2 to 3. I've been in Japan now. It'll be 4 years before we move. But I move so often that you have to reinvent this community for yourself, or at least I do. So to be able to take these ladies with me everywhere has been amazing. And to be able to talk art, I come here to a military community and they don't necessarily, they don't understand what being an artist is, or, and it takes a lot of energy to kind of explain that to people, and they're not going to understand. So it is so important to have that in your life where you have these people you can bounce ideas off with. They're in the same game you are. We all actually, 3 of us paint in watercolors, the other 2 oil and acrylic. So we even have different mediums that we can learn about, and different techniques we can learn from each other. But it's just so important to have that, because even, my husband, he's an awesome supporter, but he doesn't understand when the rejection or what it means to get into some of these things, or, competitions, or what some awards mean. So it's so nice to have just these people that know exactly what you're going through.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's like kind of the point of this podcast is to have that for people. And I always like to think of like, you and I are talking right now. Nobody else is listening, but somebody will eventually be listening. And I don't think of it as like 1,000 people or whatever listening. I think of it as like one other person that's just like a part of our conversation. And like that's great for people like to be able to listen, and that helps me with listening to other podcasts too. But it's so important for that person to be involved in the conversation as well. Like not just to like be listening to like what's going on and knowing that other people are going through the same things, but to like be able to have somebody that you can bounce your problems off of,
Right.
your successes, your triumphs, but also like the failures and like the struggles, just to have somebody that you can just talk to vent to. Like you said, it's one thing, like my wife's the same way. Like she is very supportive, and she runs, and I try to be very supportive of her. But at the same time, like there is a little bit of a disconnect where it's not like the same exact problems,
Yes, I completely understand. And I love, what I loved about listening to your podcast, because while I was doing driving trips in the States this summer, I was on the road quite a bit. And so I just was binge listening to your podcast.
Yay!
But what I loved is you have like people of all walks and all different places. And that is so encouraging, because I think it's hard when you find someone that is at the pinnacle of their career. And that can be frustrating, because how did they get there? And, why am I not there? And so you have a little bit of everything, which is really encouraging to see all walks.
Yep. We're all going through the same stuff. So yeah, thank you. Well, one thing I wanted to ask you too about being able to kind of travel the world and see different locations, has that like affected your art? Like, have you found that like your art has changed as you go from place to place? Like you take a piece of each place with you, so to speak?
Absolutely. I think I wish I had been painting more prolifically when I lived in Europe, but I still have photos, and I have the memories.
Mm-hmm.
I paint predominantly still life. I wish sometimes I was more of one of those urban sketchers or the plein air, because I live in Japan and that's pretty amazing, and it's just not my thing. And but it's kind of figuring out how to translate my experiences where I am into still life and tell a story that way. And I have photo references for years and years and years, and experiences for years and years and years. So I can't even tell you how important travel is. And even if you can't live in another country, take a workshop or travel if you can, because it changes your thought process. Even going to museums, in Asia versus Europe versus the States, you see different type of art in Asia, especially. Watercolor and works on paper are more valued than I feel they are in the States. It's just nice to have that experience and really see the world.
Oh yeah, travel is like, I think one of the biggest pick-me-ups that people can have, or just like getting out into nature, or just seeing new places, even if it is in the States, even if it is just a town over, just seeing something new and like kind of immersing yourself into like a new atmosphere gets your brain ticking in a different way, if that makes sense.
Right. And, some of my friends have done taught workshops themselves where, even though, so my Helen, that's in my group, she is doing a kind of a virtual workshop, where if you can't go to Venice, she's going to bring the photos and kind of the experience to you and do a workshop that way. So even talking to people or seeing photos or really learning about a place. I know when I was in high school, we had two ladies come in and talk about Santorini, Greece, when I was in my humanities class. And that put a spark in me to want to travel and go there. So, eventually I made it there. And so, you just never know what people's experiences and talking about it can also, what that can do for people.
Absolutely. Well, now with the traveling, with having a busy life, having to, raise children and just everything else that goes along with just life in general, have you found it to be like a struggle sometimes to fit in the art, or how have you kind of balanced that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think everyone has trouble with this. I hope it's not just me.
Yeah. I don't think it's just you.
Between mom obligations and school and learning to say no. Oh my goodness, that's been a big one for me, because especially here with the community we're in and my husband's job, there were a lot of things that I needed to do. And I like to think, there are seasons for everything. And there was a time for the last couple of years where I really did have to put some of those other things as priorities. My children are always a main priority. But my husband, it was important that I support him during some of these times over his career the last couple of years, just the way he supports me, at other times. Mm-hmm. So those have been some things that have, been difficult for me. On top of that, just on a regular basis, having self-doubt, about your work and where you are. And also not only that, but I'm a night owl. So it's hard for me to adjust. I have to get up, get kids out the door, by 7 a.m. for school. So it's hard to stay up and paint till 4 a.m. when I've got to get up, in 2-3 hours to get children out the door. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So just trying to figure out how to balance that and force myself to paint when I don't feel the most creative, focus, and treat it as a job, and not a hobby. Those kind of things are things I struggle with on a regular basis. But I think I have a clear goal and I have a clear idea of where I want to be. So that keeps me motivated and moving.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm a night owl too. And guest after guest keeps saying like the power in getting up early and getting work done. And it's like something I've been trying to do, and I have been successful some days, and it changes your day. It makes you feel so much better, but it's like I can't quite get in that habit of doing it every single day. And then at night, that's when my brain is like really ticking, and that's when the ideas still keep coming for like my own writing and stuff like that. So it's a tough thing to sometimes try to balance. And when you're feeling really motivated creatively, that doesn't always fit into like, having a full-time job or having other responsibilities,
Right. And, I had to shift my thought process a little bit because I was really down on myself because I'm like, why can't I, as soon as the kids leave, sit down and make myself paint? And I just realized I was fighting myself. I just cannot get creative until like 4 p.m. And so I had to shift it a little bit and think, okay, what can I do? I can ship things. I can answer emails. I can, take care of administrative stuff. I can do photo shoots during the day. I don't mind, because I paint from photo references mostly. So I can get creative that way and take care of those things which need to be done for me. I always do them in the day, in the sunlight. So I just really had to shift my thought process on how this was going to work. And, I realized I can stay up till 2 a.m. and still function, by getting up at 6:30 or something. So I just had to say, okay, this is how I work and this is not how everybody works, and realize my limitations and work around my own schedule, my own, body clock.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I wanted to get into your workshops and your private classes. Do you still have some of those going on?
I just taught one this summer. I do have a student here that we've gotten together a couple times. Yeah, and I'm gearing up for some workshops in 2019 and possibly 2018. So it's hard for me because we don't know where we're going to move.
Right.
We'll move this summer, but we won't find out until probably March or April. So that can be interesting. Not everybody has that, like, no clue where you're moving to. So I don't know if I'm going to be in the States or I'm going to be overseas. So it's a little harder. That has been a challenge for me. It's hard for me to tell, I have people approach me about teaching workshops and I'm like, well, I don't know where I'm going to be or what I'm going to be.
Right.
So I did finally I have one in 2019, and I talked to my husband. I'm like, look, this is on the books. I have to go. It's, I've already signed a contract. So I am just learning that I have to just kind of sometimes put things on the calendar and go with it.
Right. You talked about learning to say no before. You also have to learn to say yes at some point too.
Exactly. And that is a long-term goal of mine. Brian's Air Force career will not be forever. So after he's done with that, I would really like to teach workshops all over and really pursue that. Plus, my children are not at an age right now that I can leave them, especially with my husband deployed in the desert. So they're 11 and 8. So it's going to be a couple years before I feel like I can just say yes to everything and not have to worry about making sure, I have childcare at home and, that kind of stuff.
I wanted to talk about artists helping artists too. This is a podcast that I'm not too familiar with. So could you kind of explain what that has done for you and what it's done for other artists?
Sure. Like I said, when I first started painting, I wish I could tell you the year exactly. I have to go back. I think she's been on the air 6 years now, 6 or 7 years. Mm-hmm. And that's about when I started. And so Leslie Seda is the host, and she's out of California. And she started basically, how it started was they were just trying to have a mentoring group themselves. And she was trying to find a way, kind of like my group did, of how they could all talk together at the same time. So they kind of stumbled onto this podcast on accident because it was just a platform that they could all get together on. That's kind of how it started originally. And the idea was kind of like my mentoring group, it was like a mastermind group to kind of propel each other's careers, figure it out. But Leslie has a background in marketing. So it turned into helping artists learn how to market themselves. I think most of us can figure out how we paint or our style, even though we struggle with those things. But marketing and the business side doesn't come as easy to a lot of artists. And so that was the show's idea, was to kind of get you going, marketing yourself and how to promote yourself. And we're in an amazing age right now, where you can market yourself pretty cheap. You don't have to have a big marketing budget for the most part with digital. We've got Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, other things that have popped up. Sometimes it was just, she'll have shows on, how Instagram and how to promote yourself on Instagram, Pinterest. She also has artist interviews, talking about people's journeys, like you do with your podcast. So it's really just inspirational, and I would take notes and I would really live off, I would just go off of what she said to do in the beginning. And like I said, I eventually ended up co-hosting. So I do co-host occasionally now. It's harder since I live in Japan. Same idea, and she's still doing the same things, everything from blogging to Pinterest to Instagram to anything you can think of in the art world and marketing. So for me, like I said, it was a huge catalyst, and I kind of followed it step by step. I think for a lot of other artists, not only that, but it's put artists in touch with each other. I think part of my mentoring group, the mentoring group I'm in now came about because of AHA. She challenged everyone to form a mentoring group, and that's how ours came about. And I also have met so many artists through that podcast. You start following each other's blogs, you start finding each other on Facebook. So it's just made an art community a little bit smaller.
Very cool. Do you have any lessons, or as you've gone along with these different podcasts and stuff, do you have any lessons that have come to mind that maybe, whether they're about self-marketing or not, that you think that might help some of the listeners?
Well, I think something that I did from the beginning, and Leslie does, and you do, is reaching out to people, reaching out to other artists to talk to them. From day one, I, reached out to Carol Carter, who's an amazing watercolor artist, and she was so encouraging.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and so her and I are friends now. I've been to her studio, we visited each other, and she, really helped me in the beginning with watercolor. And I used to have, on my blog, I would do interviews once a week with artists, and that was invaluable. And it taught me to just reach out, talk to people, find their story. And most artists are super, open to talking to you about their struggles, what's worked for them, what hasn't worked for them. And also, I think through that, it made me, digital, the computer can make me braver than I am in real life. So,
yeah.
I don't mind shooting an email off, or to someone to talk to them. And through that, Keiko Tanabe and Mark Mahaffey, who are also watercolor artists. Keiko was here. She's from Kyoto. So I went up and met them when she was teaching a workshop and had dinner. And it's just, I'm much better about, where am I going and what artist lives there? Who can I go see? Whose studio can I go check out? And through AHA, reaching out for people to do interviews, just like I did with my blog, I've gone to several people's studios, and I don't know, it's just, it made me, you take away something every time you meet an artist, I think, something that they've done, some technique that they have. On top of that, it made me, moving around also made me not, I think some people have this idea, and I didn't realize this because I moved so much. Some people have this idea that you have to start with your local society, and then you can start entering, like a bigger society. And then, like in watercolor, there's American Watercolor Society, National Watercolor Society, and there's Transparent Watercolor Society, which are kind of like the big ones in the United States. And so some people thought you couldn't enter that one until you'd gone through the channels. And I didn't know anything about these channels. I didn't know anything about any of that. So I would just enter things. And I kind of had this strategy. Well, I want to get my name out on the West Coast. I want my name out on the East Coast. I want, so that's how I would enter shows. And when I would move around, people would say, well, you can't do that. And I thought, why not?
Right.
I think that being naive a little bit helped me out in that way, is that I just kind of jumped in and entered. And because of that, I think I got into more shows than I would have if I had maybe lived in one town my whole career and, stuck with a local society. Does that make sense? I'm trying.
No, it makes a lot of sense. And I think not only just putting yourself out there in different societies or like trying to get into different galleries and just embracing that naivete, but also treating, like you said, if you're going to a particular area, why not shoot an email off to somebody that you admire or somebody that's in the area? I always really try to encourage people to do that, to reach out to people that you're not sure that they'll write back. Treat an email like a practice run. And then whenever they respond to you and say yes, then it's like, now all of a sudden you're in this position where you're like, oh crap, now I have to now I get to do this. And it's like, I don't know, just treating that email like it doesn't, like it's a throwaway email almost, like it's never going to happen, but try it anyway, Right.
It's important to do those things for yourself, because you just never know what's going to open doors and what's going to happen.
Absolutely. Carrie, this has been awesome, but it's time for the final push. And this is where I ask you to reach through the microphone and grab the shoulder of one of the listeners that you've already really inspired today and just give them your best final words of advice and really push them to pursue their own creative passions.
Okay. I thought a lot about this. And so I challenge everybody, as soon as you finish listening to this, to sit down and make a list of goals. Your goals can be very specific. I'm like a organized list maker kind of person. But I know some people have, goals that are like, I just want happiness in my life, or joy in my art. So whatever is important to you, sit down and write it down, because if you don't have the goals, you'll never achieve it. So, and you can be very specific in your goals of like how you're going to do this. And you need to have short-term, mid-term, long-term goals. And some of the best advice I got from somebody was, in my career, I wanted to make, signature status in one of the art organizations that was really hard to get into, like takes years, 20 years sometimes. And someone told me, Carrie, okay, you need to have goals beyond your, the unimaginable goals, because once if you achieve that goal, that huge goal in your head, what's the next step? Because, she was saying she achieved her, the goal she didn't think she ever would. And then she was kind of floundering because she didn't know what the next step was.
Yeah.
So just make crazy goals up. And not only that, but put them out where you can see them on a daily basis. And ask yourself, when people are coming to you and asking you to do things like the PTO stuff and the whatever, and look at those goals. Is this getting me closer to that goal? Will this get me where I need to be, in life? If this is what I want to achieve. And it can really be a great place to just focus you and say, okay, this is my goal. Am I getting there? And how am I going to do it?
Absolutely. Shoot for the moon.
Exactly. And then go beyond that.
Yes. Oh, man. Carrie, thank you so much for coming on the show today and for giving us that push. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I've had a great time.
And you can find Carrie on her website, which is carriewallerfineart.com. On Instagram, she is Carrie Waller Art. And on Facebook, she is Carrie Waller Fine Art. We'll have all of that linked up at today's show notes page at yourcreativepush.com/Carrie Waller. Carrie, thanks again.
Thank you. You have a great day.
Oh, big thank you once again to Carrie for coming on this show. I just love her final push, that idea of setting goals for yourself that are further beyond your goals, setting dreams that are beyond your dreams, and seeing your creative potential as unlimited creative potential. The sky is the limit when it comes to this stuff. And as you go along this timeline, it just feels natural. It feels normal because that's the kind of creative life that you have been living for the past, weeks, months, years. So if you keep doing this creative thing, if you keep pushing yourself, if you keep getting at it every single day, it's going to feel normal to you. And you're going to start to achieve some of those dreams. You're going to start to achieve some of those goals. And it's all just going to feel commonplace because you've been living it. It's just normal to you. You've become kind of immune to that, which maybe a year or 2 years ago seemed impossible to you. It seemed like the top of a mountain. Yet your goals should shift. You should be setting new goals that are well beyond what you think you could achieve in the next couple years. It's so important to keep looking further down the road, to keep asking yourself what else is possible so that you don't get stuck in that place of, now what? And if you do find yourself in that spot where you're asking yourself, now what? Definitely, like Carrie said, find a community. And I know in the interview I said that I wasn't too familiar with Artists Helping Artists, but I have since checked them out. Such a great resource. I'll have that linked up at the show notes page. Definitely check it out. Artists Helping Artists. Great community and great podcast as well. Very important to find that kind of a community online, but it's also important to find that in real life and to find that kind of mastermind group that Carrie was talking about, to find 3 or 4 individuals that you can lock into and have enough bandwidth for each other so that it's very specific. They know you as well as you know yourself, probably better than yourself, the more and more that you kind of talk to each other and work your own problems out, share your own successes with each other. Do whatever you can to find that kind of a partnership or group that you can move forward with. And also, Carrie mentioned Carol Carter, and Carol was also on this podcast, and it was one of my favorite episodes. It was on the short list for the best of episodes. If you need some extra inspiration today, listen to that episode. It was such a wonderful talk. yourcreativepush.com/Carol Carter or yourcreativepush.com/51. And after that, if you need one more episode to listen to Justin Hopkins on episode 205, because he is coming back on our next episode along with Yoshino, who is the host of the Artist Decoded podcast. Now, when Justin was on the show before, he talked about his partnership with Yoshino, working together for this collective called No Wave, NOHWAVE. And the two of them come on the show next episode to talk about that collective, kind of how it started. And it was a really fun conversation that ended up kind of turning back on myself as well to talk about where I'm kind of planning to go with this podcast that I mentioned in the last episode. If you want to check out Yoshino and Artist Decoded, you can go to artistdecoded.com. And if you want to check out Justin, you can find him on his website at rarebitprojects.com. And we'll have resources to both of those guys linked up at the show notes page today at yourcreativepush.com/262. But that is all I've got for you today. So hopefully you were inspired to go and get your work done. So go and get it done, and we'll be here for you next time if you need the push again. I love you all very much. Have a wonderful, productive weekend, and we will be back on Monday for next week's episode. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye. Never miss a push. Head to yourcreativepush.com/subscribe to find the easiest way for you to subscribe to the podcast.